All right, hey, what's up, everybody? This is This Machine Kills Fascist, and I am your facilitator, Dorian Wallace, he, him. And today we're chatting with the amazing Anthony Vernon, philosophy professor and thinker on approaching fascism. And yeah, Anthony, you said you wanted to mention something
Yeah,
to start us off today.
I think last time we didn't really speak to labor relations too much, and that's kind of been a big thing. And I want to kind of start off with I was volunteering at a food kitchen, and one of the other volunteers there, mind you, this is a person at a food kitchen, right? So they mean well, right? They weren't there for a criminal reason. They were there for even if they were, who cares, right? Point being, right? They're volunteering, right? And this was someone who volunteered out of the goodness of their heart. We started talking though, and she is Cuban in background, like myself, and she's talking about how, yeah, if you're an Amazon worker like myself, you shouldn't make $15 an hour. Like you shouldn't, like that's not something you should do. Like, Amazon workers shouldn't get paid that much. And I'm like, well, wait a sec, but that's a living wage, if not less than a living wage in South Florida. And she's like, oh, what do you want? Do you want doctors and Amazon workers to make the same amount? Obviously, that's not my stance as a social democrat. But one of the things that you can see in certain places in regards to like mutual relations between labor is how one of the things that fascism does very well is it pins labor against labor. This isn't unique to fascism, but fascism will hyperdrive this expression, right? Will pin workers on the basis of their sexual orientation. Look at all the anti-DEI stuff from Trump. We'll pin immigrant workers against non-immigrant workers, and we'll just like pin, sort of class against class, right? Like, oh, doctors inherently deserve this, workers don't. And it is an interesting thing to see the relationship between capitalism and fascism because as a social democrat, I'm not inherently anti-capitalist, but it's interesting to see what sort of drives and tendencies that fascism pushes of capitalism versus the drives and tendencies that are pushed by like a social democratic framework.
Wow. Yeah, I guess my first question to ask you is, what would you say, just like, as if I were this person and I were to ask, like, how much should a doctor make and how much should an Amazon worker make? I'm just trying to imagine
Yeah, I
being
mean,
being a person of like who would ask this kind of question.
well, I
Um,
mean, for me, ultimately, you can't like set a standard rate, country by country. But I think one, it's good for everyone to have a living wage and access to quality social services. And from a social democratic framework, I'm okay with healthy competition. I love, the NBA, for example. And, so there is such thing as healthy competition to the point where others are not harmed, right? I think it's good to have that built into the system, but not be a requirement of existence, right? One should not have to be required to bust their ass in order to get by, right? Obviously, I think it's good for people who can contribute, who want to contribute to be able to. There is also some arguments on like, should people have to inherently work? That there are definitely arguments there. But at the end of the day, I think we can have hierarchy without like extreme cruelty. And I think what fascism does is it takes away the healthy competition within an economy, if such a thing can truly be done, and makes it a dog eat dog, unhealthy competition, right? All against all in regards to labor relations. Like I have to get mine and you can't get yours. It's basically like, if I ain't eating, then you ain't eating either type mentality.
yeah, it's it's really interesting that the capitalist realism experience of we can't even imagine something outside of capitalism. It's very strange that you can literally do backbreaking work and feel like it's not worthy of a living wage. And this is I don't want to generalize because I think that sometimes this can come off as trash talking doctors or attorneys or people with that
Hmm.
kind of education. But I will tell you, when the hospice job that I work at, uh, there was a period of time where we had a social worker who then got ill and had to leave the job, and there was like a 6 month period where there was no social worker on site. And so myself as a mental health person had to kind of find patients and find assessments without the help of somebody who that's their job to do that for about
Yeah.
6 months. And so the reason I'm saying this is the housekeeper is who I went to more than anybody to find out what patient needs were, because this person, she is so good at just talking to patients and getting information out of them and learning about their family history, learning about like just all this stuff. And I like to the point where she's joined me in music therapy sessions and like sang along and danced. I've given her instruments. And um the reason I'm saying this is that I don't find this person's job any less valuable than uh and then the doctors that work there, or the nutritionist that works there, or the physical
Yeah.
therapist that works there, or myself, the music therapist. Like,
Yeah, I completely agree with that, where it's like you can have competitive pay,
yeah,
because I mean, I think about it like this, where it's like different jobs have different, requirements, right? I myself, as a professor, I can't fix a car to save my life, right? Like there are just different types of education. There are different outlets of education, right? Different educations result in different things and different skill sets. How do we inherently value these things is a difficulty for sure. But at the end of the day, right, should me with a master's degree make as much as someone with a PhD? Maybe yes, maybe no. But there does seem to be ways in which we could set up striving incentives and difference in pay without like deep cruelty, without deep cruelty. And that's the thing where it's like, yeah, the doctor may not be the hardest working person, right? There's that whole sort of meritocratic lie where it's like, yeah, some people do rise up through the ranks of meritocracy. My American grandfather did that. He started in a very poor situation and, was successfully a vice president of multiple banks, right? That is like the old school American dream person. I have someone in my life that did that. But a lot of people also just have happenstance. They made a good investment, or they were born into privilege, or, these things happen more than what happened to my grandfather. So the meritocracy, because it's not a full lie, because there are case examples, promotes the idea that more of it is meritocratic than not, but it's the opposite. More of it is happenstantial, and only a small portion is meritocratic.
yeah. There's also a piece about it that I find it's completely understandable why fascists at the top, like the elite class fascists, would feel the way that they do about economics, but on a literal, just rational understanding and a humanist understanding of how economics works, if we give people money, they stimulate the economy more. It's that's what happened with the New Deal. Was
Or give directly, the charity that gives
yeah,
money to farmers. Like if you give people
exactly,
money, they have more buying power. And what people by and
exactly.
large do in these studies from Give Direct is that they're not just buying, useless commodities or drugs. What does the farmer do that has a couple of dollars to buy a hoe? They buy the hoe to make their lives easier. And then if their lives are easier, they're able to be more productive, seek more education. It's just like, having resources gives you the ability to take risks, to have chances, right? Which is part of why if we are going to keep the capitalist structure, permanently or for now, right, the social democratic route shows people will take risks if they know that they have housing and healthcare and clean water and food and all that sort of jazz. And it just makes everyone per capita better off.
I'll tell you that during this is a personal experience, but during the pandemic, there were the stimulus checks, but there were also because my wife and I are professional artists, I was not working as a music therapist full time at that point. Um, my wife and I are both professional artists, and so we were able to get artist stimulus checks as well. And that was actually some of the happiest times of our life and our like home. Not in the world, and obviously I'm saying that like very cautiously because I know it was
Yeah,
a
of
horror
course.
story for some people, um but we invested in things. Like I literally invested in what is my Substack now, due to that. We were able to just like actually focus on like our home and like our kid, and um we bought things that we needed for either our like economic standing, or like we bought tools and resources that helped us become more stable.
Yeah. And in
It was.
contrast, you'll have a guy like Matt Walsh say, "Oh, we need to imprison all the homeless slash unhoused people," right? Because, all homeless people are inherently drug addicts. Meanwhile, Master Matt Walsh, who's not listening, most likely,
Yes.
I give a lecture on homeless slash unhoused issues. That's part of, the series of lectures I give for my introductory classes, both of them. Um, intro and to philosophy and intro to ethics. And in doing that, right, I've had multiple students write down that they were homeless for a period of time, right? There is not this association with, college students and homelessness, but every time I've given this lecture so far, someone has said that they were homeless during that semester. Multiple people, even this semester, or others said that, hey, I had a friend who was homeless, right? Like, or I had a family member who became homeless. And so the image of homelessness as just a bunch of people like shooting fentanyl into themselves under a bridge, yeah, it exists for a reason because it is unfortunately there. But the vast majority of homelessness in the country is a result of individuals who did not have a social safety net. And as a result, they fell on hard times so hard that they landed on the streets. And yeah, a lot of people are able to use the limited resources in the United States to work themselves out of, homelessness. I can only imagine the detriment of places where this situation is even worse. But what does the fascist do? It goes, oh, well, you're not part of the nation because you're homeless. We have these lovely prisons for you, as most strongly expressed by someone like Matt Walsh. Because if you are not participating into the energies of the nation, into the state, then you are not worthy of the state. You're not worthy of the nation. As Kyle Kalinske words quite well, it is literally criminalizing being poor.
Yes. Yes, there's a buddy of mine. I'm not going to state his name for the moment, just because I don't want to speak on behalf of him, but a buddy of mine who should probably come on the show sometime. We were in the military together, but he worked for an organization. He's a Christian. I'm not religious myself, but the organization is called Relief Bus, and they have a bus that goes into various places like Harlem, Elizabeth, New Jersey, I think Newark, New Jersey, where the mayor was just arrested a few days ago. Speaking of fascism,
Yes.
anyways, this organization, they go to these places and they have free vegetable chili, they have medical resources, they have just resources on how to get people into spacing, they have education opportunities, like all of these just sorts of things. And um anyways, on a personal note, when I went to go observe one time, when they were in Harlem, a gentleman came up who was struggling with crack addiction and talked to my friend just about it, was opening up and everything. And at this point in my life personally, I was very critical of religion. And this uh man struggling with crack addiction, my friend who and is a Christian organization asked if he wanted to pray, asked if I was comfortable like joining the prayer. I said yes. And that was actually one of the first kind of softening moments of like, okay, no, there is value in this like action. And it, I've adapted and changed. But the other piece that I wanted to mention, the reason I'm bringing this gentleman up, or my friend up, um, is he brought up a concept, and he's not a mental health professional, so don't treat this as diagnosis, but he is somebody who works in the streets and sees people firsthand. But one of the concepts that they talk about in his workspace is people who develop schizophrenia or schizoid type personality experiences like paranoia, hearing voices. My friend explained it. He's like, well, when you become homeless, when you become houseless, you lose access to hygiene. So you start to smell bad. People start to distance themselves from you because you smell bad. And you need to talk to somebody, and no one will talk to you. So you start to talk to yourself, and you can become so isolated that it's like isolation. It's literally
Yeah.
it's you become
Well,
isolated even
and
if
we
you're
don't
around humans.
Yeah, and we don't have access to a lot of public showers or public baths in the United States, let alone sinks that you can use for a long period of time without like a security guard coming in and going, "Hey, what are you doing with a toothbrush in a public restroom?" And so, there is that sort of issue where you create a system that does not grant access to just even basic things like that. Like, what would be inherently wrong with a public shower as long as you can maintain? I mean, it really isn't a good argument in my mind. Oh,
Mhm.
what if it gets damaged? Anything can get damaged. Anything can get vandalized, right? Like, I speak to myself
Street signs.
as a punk teenager in like suburban America. Like, I would go and stink bomb houses, right? I'm not, so it's, right? Like, it's vandalism is not like a unique phenomenon to like, to any particular group or individual necessarily. And on the religious point, one of the things, and I say this as an agnostic myself, but
Mhm.
if you read the Bible, right, the overwhelming message of Christ, aside from following him and faith, is to give to the poor in spirit, the poor in resources, just to give to the poor. And it's been crazy the way in which American fascism has adopted Christianity as almost like an empty, vague signifier, as opposed to actually taking the message of Christ. And I say this as someone who teaches at a Catholic university. When I talk about, um, you know, the Bible and the gospel, I think again, I'm not perfect. I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm a philosopher, but, there's enough clear evidence in there to go, how the prosperity gospel has emerged and how that has messed with labor relations. I mean, it's through the work of
Mhm.
Billy Graham post New Deal and in the midst of the rise of the Great Society, that while Billy Graham wasn't successful at pushing back against the Great Society, the uh, students and believers of Billy Graham, used vague, abstract Christian messaging and the prosperity gospel to push against the New Deal, to push against the Great Society and worsen labor relations in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, there was also just the fear mongering of the atheist state, the USSR, that atheism or no religion equals Marxist-Leninism. Of course, like it was not spoken that precisely, but that's kind of
No,
what.
it was spoken that precisely,
Yeah.
like by Billy Graham even.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
that direct even.
Yeah, yeah. What I mean is is they often said the word communism as opposed to Marxist Leninism.
Oh, right, right, right. But
Yeah.
and it's that sort of thing though, where again, I think
I know.
one of the things what fascists will do is use any tool towards their ends. So does a fascist state have to
Mhm.
necessarily be capitalistic? No, but it's one of those things in the same way that like every instantiation of fascism has been capitalistic. Every instantiation of fascism has had a figurehead, be it Trujillo, be it Batista, be it Franco, be it Hitler, be it Mussolini, right? So, because ultimately fascism, at least, is hyper nationalism. But it just so happens that certain expressions of capitalism have been useful for hypernationalism, and those are the, competitive ends of capitalism that like taking, the competitive nature of capitalism as a useful tool to assert one's nation, which, as Mussolini writes, is not necessarily the majority, right? It can be used as a tool to distinguish members of the nation. It can be used as a tool of economic warfare. It can be used as a tool of international competition.
You know, one of the just connecting pieces to Mussolini era fascism and contemporary fascism, on fascism doesn't even have to be the majority. Nick Fuentes, little bit before Donald Trump was elected, like maybe 6 or 7 months. So it was still in election season, but um, there was the social response to, no, wow, no, this would have been a couple of years then. Sorry. There was the social response to Supreme Court uh, uh, removing Roe v. Wade. Uh, and I don't know if I'm using the right words, but um, Nick Fuentes was speaking about how this is evidence that he was like, our view at the far right, our view on abortion is an unpopular opinion. We need to force this on people. And he stated very bluntly, I believe it's all the same video, but he stated very bluntly that he's like, we want Donald Trump to be a dictator. We want him to have total power. Uh, and it's just I mean, literally could have been directly out of Mussolini's mouth or a supporter of Mussolini's
Yeah.
mouth.
And in terms of that power, right? Like capitalism, what it's good for, it's very good at making a lot of money, right? It's really good at producing a lot of resources. Yes, we could talk about, its overproduction, overconsumption, right? It's without regulation and in its laissez-faire tendencies, it's not going to distribute those resources. But again, that's useful if you make it a laissez-faire capitalism because you can, you know, push those resources towards the energies of the state, quote unquote, the interests of the state, be it the military, be it the oligarchs within the fascist ranks, right? Like you can, gather a lot of resources from the state to push the interests of the quote unquote state. And so, um, whereas communism has to be, distributed by nature, social democracy has to be, right? When you have distribution, not as much energies, not as much money or resources are going to the state. Now, whether fascists are actually good economically at acquiring those things, I mean, it depends on the regime, right? Like, unfortunately, Nazi Germany, early Italy, did make better economic strides, not for the people, but in regards of GDP. Whereas like, Trujillo was a mess. So, it very much depends. But yeah, this is one of the reasons why it's like, oh, we'll use labor and we'll expend labor, and labor can be expended for the state.
Yeah, I mean, even Karl Marx and even Peter Kropotkin, who are two differing leftist thinkers, they both spoke about the positive piece of capitalism is the industrialization of production. You can mass produce things. That was a major innovation in capitalism, and that's coming from Marx and Kropotkin. They both have said that. Um, it does not mean, and that this is where capitalism and fascism really do blend well together, but does not mean that we are now, it's a static thing. We are now capitalist, and that is just what we're supposed to be because some nature thing. Like I have literally my I've got family members who are right-wing libertarians. Not successful economically themselves. They're actually way more on the poverty side of things, but they have these libertarian views, like these anarcho-capitalist or Ayn Randian objectivist worldviews. And I have literally heard arguments about how capitalism is just an inherent piece of the natural order of things, just like gravity. it's it's just very like I literally was raised that way,
Yeah.
and and it just it's such a strange thing to realize that it that people are literally
Yeah.
taught that.
Well, I think to mention Kropotkin, in
Yeah.
my I give a lecture on animal ethics, and Kropotkin has this paragraph about how even animals go about mutual aid. And so, if you observe nature, right, mutual aid is just as quote unquote natural as is competition, right? It's not as static as we give everyone, we have competition, right? When you look at nature, right? Both of these things are natural. And what happens with anarcho-capitalists, they go, oh, look at the competitive aspects of nature. Look at the lion eating the zebra. Look at the, parasitic bugs, right? Those exist alongside the albatrosses that mate for lives, the bees that make hives together. So these are just aspects of nature, the competitive aspects and the giving aspects. And yes, while I have my personal biases towards, fusing the two together through social democracy, one thing we can certainly look at globally is that, like, hey, we're not doing enough of the mutual aid stuff. No matter where you stand on this spectrum.
Yeah. And I mean, just on the argument too about the way the anarcho-capitalists observe nature, um, they don't take into account that, like, for instance, a lion and an antelope, the lions don't massacre all the antelopes and force the living ones into slavery. Like it's they get the weakest one and they eat that one for a period of time. And I mean, even they don't take into account that you can look at watering holes and predator and prey. If the predator is not hungry and not hunting, they will drink at the same watering hole at the same time. And so there's so
Yeah.
many aspects that are not taken into account.
Well, I mean, there is the Nietzschean argument that Nietzsche says that if animals were in our position, they would act the exact same way, right? Like if cats were the dominant species in the world, like they would do the same shit that we do, right? Like we are making this observation out of the position of being the dominant species in the world. But I think, again, in these natural things, right? Na nature has so many different expressions, as do people have so many different expressions. And one of the things that fascists do, they reduce all of existence towards the nation. And like you work for the nation, like you want to be the best possible worker to make your country proud, to be a contributing member of your society. And again, this isn't only done by fascists, but what do fascists do? They take these sorts of rhetorics and turn them up to, 100.
Yeah, it's they treat social hierarchical structures as if they are inherent biological truths that cannot be changed whatsoever.
Yeah.
Uh yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I mean, I'm with you on that. And I think at the end of the day, right, the top ordering of society is something that may or may not be useful, may or may not be oppressive. But, at the end of the day, it's certainly not something that's in nature inherently. Because how do you rank order the gazelle below the lion just because it happens to be eaten by the lion? Like, what is, like, these inherencies are bizarre. But when you create these inherencies, you create these abstractions, people will bound themselves to that abstraction if it's convincing, right? Which is why you can have someone like Nick Fuentes bound to a bunch of, abstractions that he's like, we need to convince people of these abstractions, of these ideas, to
Hmm.
be in support of a dictatorship, to be in support of, giving into anti-immigration sentiments are huge from Nick Fuentes. So, but
Hmm.
again, right, there's no inherent borders, there's no inherent sort of hierarchical structure, right? Labor is an option, right? The ways labor is expressed are optional, right? There are so many ways to go about living in the world, and fascism goes, nope, this is your box. This is your range of existence.
Hmm. Hmm. There's I think it's Noam Chomsky, and I'm going to be paraphrasing the quote, but the concept I like. Uh, one of the things that's challenging about studying human beings is it's like we're studying a pack of gorillas, except we're the gorillas studying ourselves. And uh, and it might be Chomsky, and I might be changing the animal, but it but the but I like that concept because there are things that one of my favorite things in therapy school was when we were learning couples counseling, where we would watch real videos of couple counseling sessions where arguments took place, and we would we would have our group discussion about what we witnessed, and then we would hear the version from the husband and the version from the wife, and it would the amount of blame the other person would put on the opposing side would be like 80-90% almost, whereas as the observer it would often feel more 55-45 or 52-48. Like it really would feel like, well, yes, this person did say this, but this person also insulted this person like prior to that. And it didn't make it easier at first in my own relationship, but but it did eventually start to help to realize where um when we observe other people's actions, starting to understand that we ourselves are doing those actions, and we have our blind spots. And I think fascism is it's very effective at utilizing those blind spots
Yes.
as a way to navigate people. uh
Yes. Yeah, it's America is great. But there's these Democrats, these immigrants, these trans people in the way of America's true greatness, right? It is great, but there's these ungreat elements, and maybe we could get them out of here, right? And again, there are, individuals who do call for this stuff in these circles. Are they the majority voice? I don't know, but they're getting louder, right? And they're successful with, immigration so far. I believe it was the other day in my own area alone, ICE put out that they had arrested 1,000 people throughout South Florida, detained in South Florida alone. And, you know, again, I think the issue at hand here is that sort of, being like, oh, well, we're not at fault. The nation is always right. And because we're always right, we can set how things are. Like nothing is my fault. Like I'm 95% not to blame. But the 5% is those immigrants, is those Democrats, is those
yeah
things which actually aren't doing anything, but they use as an excuse to to go after, to say like, oh, I'm not at fault, these forces are at fault. Not to say that the Democratic Party is inherently perfect or that no immigrant or no trans person has ever done anything bad. But the point at hand is like they're not the problems of the nation as a totality. There's so many other forces, but no, 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 no. We can't look at all of that. We're going to reduce all of our lack of greatness, not on anything I can do to get better, to be better to my citizens, have more social services, etc. No, no. If we get rid of these things we don't like, if we get rid of the other, they are to blame, not me. And when they are gone, I'll be good to go.
yeah But there's also um the the piece about well, sorry, I'm gonna backtrack. First of
Yeah.
all, some of the footage that's come out of people getting disappeared is just shocking. I really do hate it. Just on a human level, it like there was the woman who was just chased down, and her white neighbors were trying to
Oh, in
protect her.
Massachusetts.
Yes, yeah, like that one. I don't know what it is about that video in particular that's just I can't get it out of my
Me, I
head.
think it's a mother getting slammed to the asphalt. As while she is being slammed, being told, "You are under arrest." I think it was like seconds before, like you're under arrest, and I think it's seconds that transpire from the officer saying that to going boom to the ground.
Mhm.
The visceral violence demonstrated by that clip. The fact that that woman, was trying to stop her mother from being deported and was willing to stand in front of that car with her baby, right? Like to the point where it's like, do not separate my family, right? And then her having to relinquish her baby to a trusted neighbor to continue the, chase down, and then getting arrested for, child endangerment, which again, right? Again, the way people react in hard situations, what a difficult situation to see your own mother getting put into an unmarked vehicle, not knowing where they're going to end up, and not thinking and just putting yourself in front of that person, with your baby in hand. Like that's just a series of pain and loss and confusion and just acting in the midst of instinct. And then, being, punished for, an attempt to, save your own parent is difficult to watch and witness in real time.
Yeah, and the fact that the propaganda we can really identify the pattern on how they're doing it. It's all undocumented immigrants are criminal or gang, criminal in some way or gang affiliated specifically. And then also gangs are terrorist groups. And so
Hmm.
we're actually deporting terrorists. And the thing that is so the reason why this argument needs to fall apart, the people need to see this, is think of any event that we consider a terrorist attack on our soil and how those arrests go. When like the Boston bombers, for instance, they had a full shootout with pipe bombs being thrown. Um, and that was after they murdered a police officer from behind in a car. This is days after the bombing. Um, this is just them like getting to the next place that they're going to try to do this again. And it's so ridiculous to make the argument that the people that are being deported are terrorists when they're rolling up unmarked, no identifiers, masked up, and these supposed terrorists just get arrested. Like it doesn't line up with any example of of terrorism we have ever seen.
I remember, I don't remember if it was the 2016 election or the 2020 cycle, but Bernie Sanders verbally said that even the Boston bomber should have a right to vote from prison, right? That all Americans, that voting should be universal. And I think that's what's being lost on here is that sort of like universality of rights, that like what makes us better than the gang member, the terrorist, right? Separating those two very clearly, right? What separates us from individuals who do violence upon us is that we should be better than the person doing violence upon us. This is one of the many arguments against the death penalty, right? Why are you going to kill a killer? Then you are condoning killing by just a different means. And so in that though, right, the rhetoric, you worded it beautifully, is very clear, right? That, illegal immigration is a criminal crime, not a civil one, even though on the books it's civil, right? Then, oh, you are a criminal, by nature. Um, And if you are a criminal by nature already, well, don't worry, you're also a gang member, and gangs are now terrorists. I guess the Bloods and the Latin Kings got to go too, right? But that also could go that direction. Once you justify these things, you increase the number of people that could be put on the books, right? Like, someone will eventually make the argument, deport every Crip, deport every Blood, deport every, Latin King, and then people could start being marked as being members of these types of gang organizations as an excuse, so it just opens up that possibility, not saying it's going to inherently happen. And so, yeah, these certain rhetorics are dangerous, not just in them themselves as they are occurring, but also the slippery slopes they could continue to lead into.
Yeah, it's also just absolutely disgusting that they're now making the argument that there's too many people for due process, and they're sending people to a mega security prison in another country, and then it's like, oh well, it's out of our hands. We can't do anything.
Well, also
It's
Trump has tried to seek a deal with Libya also, right?
I
To
know.
increase this sort of system because it's like I guess El Salvador doesn't have enough room anymore, like, for the proposed plans. And you also like setting a quota on people that need to be deported every day, like you know what I mean? That just is going to create, incidents where where you're not going after, people who are committing criminal offenses that are illegal, right? This is what the United States has always done. If you have committed a civil violation and a criminal violation, you're out of here, right? Like, of course, there were deportations of illegal, immigrants in,
Yes.
the Biden era, the Bush era, the Obama era. Duh, of course, these things occurred, and sometimes they should. I, don't think any murderer of any background should. But again, rather than, giving into that sort of reasonable rhetoric, all that has to be done is, as you word well, I think it was days after Abrego Garcia was arrested. What does the Trump press secretary do? They bring up a case from I think it was 2023 where and it's a tragedy that she was, a hiker was murdered by someone who happened to be an illegal migrant in North Carolina. Yes, this stuff fucking occurs. It's sad no matter what. But what is done is using, individual examples to demonize groups where no one from any group inherently, any class, any this or that is, inherently evil.
Yeah, nobody commits a crime because they're trans. Nobody commits a crime because they're an immigrant. The crimes are committed oftentimes for situational reasons, sometimes dispositional reasons, very large systemic reasons. Uh, I'll tell you that one interesting, and this is anecdotal, but one interesting perspective in the prison system is you'll see on the news, like because we have the TVs on at Rikers Island, they have them on a lot of times, and you'll see it on the news like homeless man assaults woman and blah blah blah, and everyone, like I'm saying, like everyone in the room will be like, what the fuck, like why the fuck would someone do some shit like that, like it's fucking disgusting. And it'll be very surreal because internally it's like, y'all remember, like, you know what they were saying about you when you were on the news. But then the other piece of it is, and this is anecdotal, but the person will come in and and yes, like what they may have done is overblown, or sometimes like downright just like, what the fuck did you do that for? But there's oftentimes they like, well, yeah, they spit on me, or they called me a slur, or like there's a detail that's missing from the report, and it doesn't justify the behavior. In fact, like, you don't condone the behavior, but it's not just something that happens out of nowhere. There are things that you can learn and observe that explain where and how it happened, and
Yeah,
it's
which
just
doesn't necessarily justify them, but
yes.
explains causal stuff. And this also brings us back to the very start with
Yeah.
the Amazon worker, that's literally distributing food, also simultaneously talking about how like, her coworkers are overpaid, right? Like literally in the midst of like food distribution for struggling individuals, talking about how like, you know, certain, people, are paid too much on the Amazon floor, right? No critique of Jeff Bezos, right, making too much. And again, I think that's one of the things, again, a lot of rhetorics do this, right? It isn't just exclusive to fascism, but there's a lot of rhetorics of self-hatred that exist out there, right? I'm sure a
Hmm.
fascist reactionary person would go, yeah, just like how white people are taught to hate themselves. Again, right? We can agree to definitely factually disagree to the extent that that is happening. Not that it's never occurred, but like it's not in the public school system. I would know as someone that's been in public education. But the more common form of self-hate is like, oh, like you're right, I shouldn't make a living wage. Oh, that's right, like, like they're a criminal, like the hatred of like, of criminal behavior, inherently, right? Like a criminal is inherently a bad person, right? Like that individuals, like immigrants, aren't deserving of certain rights. That's what this comes down to. The fascist goes, hey, you're not deserving of these rights. The only thing you're deserving of is our graciousness if you contribute to the nation.
There's there was a training I went to. It was on indigenous practices in mental health, and it was a very cool double presentation because the one gentleman was he was an indigenous healer from, oh my goodness, a group, one of the indigenous towns in Arizona, New Mexico area. But this person was an indigenous healer, but also a PhD psychotherapist, clinical psychologist,
Oh yeah,
and
there's a lot of that in New Mexico because there's the
yeah,
Navajo Nation up north in
yeah.
Arizona and New Mexico, and then there's a psychoanalytic institution in Santa Fe.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So this gentleman basically was giving a presentation on two-eyed seeing, and it was very just interesting how it wasn't weighing one over the other, and it wasn't um say it was in fact like implying that both of these methods need to be part of our work. And one of the concepts was we look at a person and we study and we observe, you know, trying to help the person discover if they are struggling with trauma or if they're struggling with some kind of neurodiverse processing, or like we're working on those elements. But then there's also the how's the person feeling today? Like, how's their family life? How's their uh how's their just spiritual life right now? You know, are they religious? Are they not religious? Like, where are they in their journey? Are they comfortable with themselves? And it's a really good insight into sort of working with folks. But the one of the other lecturers who was a psychotherapist who was studying under to learn indigenous practices, but she said uh, that her observation of our culture is that if people do not fit into capitalism, we incarcerate them,
Yeah.
or we try to incarcerate them. And when you understand incarceration as not just prisons and jails, but also probation, also psychiatric hospitals, also um, immigration detention centers, also youth detention centers. I think I said probation, parole. There are many ways in which incarceration is taking place, and that's where the numbers really come from. Because there's not literally 2 million people in prison right now. There are close to that, but there are many people who have gone into prison. They're out. They're on probation,
Yeah, they're
or
part of
they're
the larger system
yeah,
of
yeah.
crime and punishment.
Mm-hmm.
And one
Or
of the
like,
things,
oh, go
oh,
ahead.
oh, and just to very quickly, like one of the things, because I give a lecture, around Dostoevsky, Foucault, Angela
Mm.
Davis, and Ernst, around, crime in various perspectives on
Damn,
crime and
son.
punishment. Yeah, it's a very mixed bag of
Yeah,
individuals.
that's like I like
Um,
would really love to take that course.
But it's one of those things where, I'll still have a lot of students respond like criminal equal bad. And it's like, but wait, no, look at all these unjust laws. That's also included. Like I talk about civil disobedience in that lecture where it's like, wait, no, but like look at these like lifetime imprisonment for the usage of marijuana, right? And so it's one of these things where it's like, yes, obviously there are certain crimes that are nearly universally agreeable as being, bad. I think like by and large, we don't want murder on the books, right? But again, is stealing a piece of bread the same as like Bernie Madoff's, Ponzi scheme, right? These are still stealing by definition. And so what ends up happening is these sorts of systems, as you point out, well, where there's not this focus on the day-to-day life or trauma-informed care or backgrounds or anything, there is steal, bad, take bad, and it's very much a caveman mentality. Not to call people stupid, it's just that like it is, appealing to those aspects of our brain that want things to be clear, simple, and simplified.
There's a piece that I'm really interested in, just sort of psychoeducation on how we do think in dichotomous ways. Because I've caught just even when speaking, when either offering a criticism or um uh yeah, just even speaking about like something that needed to be done better. There's oftentimes a response of a like, well, don't worry about like it was great, and which I understand like pieces of that, but there is also there needs to be some constructive growth. Like I've been having on another podcast that y'all should check out. It's called Shadow Talks. Uh with a really cool dude named Lucius. But anyways, he's an African American gentleman, younger than me. Like we're I don't know how old, but it's starting to become more obvious that we are more than a decade apart. I need to stop making Wu-Tang Clan references, thinking it's anything cool. Like it's like, dude, shut the fuck up. Like, but to myself, this is my inner
Yes.
voice. But anyways, we have been having intense conversations about patriarchy and women, and uh, because we've been speaking about and these talks have been majority women, cis and trans, as well as I think I'm the only white, like European white person. Um, and yeah, anyways, these dialogues have been really interesting where we talk about like people like George Jackson, who wrote just some really cutting critique on fascist structures from the perspective of the person impacted the most from a fascist system, and like George Jackson, who helped me understand fascism in a fluid process. How his argument was that African Americans in the United States were experiencing fascism, even though the United States was not a
Was not
fascist.
fascist at the time.
Yeah, yes, and so he speaks about how there's definitional fascism and there's also the fluid reactionary process that can be analyzed, and he makes all these brilliant just perceptions and brilliant arguments, and then every other chapter, I swear to God, when he talks about women, it's the most sexist shit in the planet. Like he even speaks about his own mother in this just like very degrading way. Like, well, you're a woman, you wouldn't understand these things that men do serious ideas, and it's like, and it, and so the reason I say this is brought this up in the dialogue, and there was some like well, it was a different time, and it's like, yeah, yes, of course it was a different time. I'm not saying he is an evil bad person. I am saying that it's very annoying that he has these brilliant observations and there's these big blind spots, and we need to analyze where those blind spots come from, and we can still like take this work as extremely important.
Yeah.
He and we can observe it as at the time. The reason I to finish my thought all the way through is I have no problem with speaking about that it was a different era, or that there were different norms, but it was just that I caught that there was a defensive response to to having a dialogue about somebody who I respect. Like I literally have both of his books just up on my shelf as references because I find his work so important to the work that I do contemporarily. And I have had enough Black women clients to have learned just enough horror stories about what many of them have gone through, even
Yeah.
from people who they're supposed to be in community with. And it's I don't think there's anything wrong with pointing that criticism out, uh, and also having respect for the person. Like you know,
You're
I
talking to a Nietzsche scholar. Like
exactly.
I mean, the guy was a weirdo incel at the end of his life. Like, there's plenty of like things that Nietzsche said where I'm like he wasn't anti-Semitic, but my God, that man was brutally sexist at the end of his
Yes.
life. And so, and so, yeah, I think one of the things we can do
Yeah.
with all this though is what ends up happening. Um, that and fascists take advantage of this in even individuals who are good at resisting fascism can fall prey to the divisiveness that just inherently exists. Fascists are very good at noticing inherent divisiveness and go, oh, you're against trans people, you want religion, you want this, and pin up against, to the point where they can break down society towards their ends. Have you been paying attention to some of the stuff that Howard Lutnick has been talking about?
Um, Not specifically, no.
So, Howard Lutnick is the Secretary of Commerce. One statement that he has made is talking about how defunded doctors and defunded scientists can, put the little screws into iPhones, right? And so in these conversations of, and there's many important ones to be had, right? What ends up happening is that the scope of who gets put under the fascist boot expands outside of just, and not say just as a dismissive way, but expands outside of minoritized communities and just who is considered the minority, who is considered who needs to be used by the nation grows and grows. And so we don't want these experiences to expand or even exist in the first place. One of the things that's been an argument in Florida, I kid you not, in the midst of mass deportation, as mentioned earlier, is the discussion on if we should bring back child labor to a greater extent in the state of Florida, if we should allow high school students to work overtime, right? And in this, right, what ends up happening when you put all the energies towards the nation, right? Bodies just become bodies, be they black, white, Latino, etc. The fascist does not care. They use these points of divisiveness so we cannot fight against the fascists trying to use any and all bodies towards the nation's end. And I have not read George Jackson personally, but you read this in Frantz Fanon about how the divisiveness between various people in West Africa and, that the French, did their divide and conquer to get a certain group of people pushing on the French colonial project.
Yeah, to summarize George Jackson, just real quick, imagine the intellect of Franz Fanon, but no education and like totally hood. Like it's like,
Okay,
yeah,
I'll
yeah, or no formal education, I
that
mean.
is an intriguing hook to get me to read some George Jackson.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's the reason I found his work so valuable is he wrote it while incarcerated, and he wrote it prior to him being killed in prison for a questionable accusation. It was like an escape attempt supposedly, but there's questions about it. Uh, because he was a radical thinker, and it was that era where there was just much more intentional harm being put towards Black radicals. But anyways, yeah, it's the reason I find him so effective is he really explains the experience of being a victim of fascism in fascism, but also understanding that not every one of his comrades who are in the fight, in the struggle, are experiencing what he's experiencing. He just
Or could experience what he's experiencing,
yes.
right? How like a lot of white women in the South will,
Mm-hmm.
fight for causes against some of their interests because they ultimately are trying to protect the white aspects of themselves over the other aspects of themselves, i.e., their womanhood, being the second sex in like Bouvarian terms, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the difficulty here. And so I mean, again, when you divide labor, right? It's unsurprising that like unionization has gone down in the United States, that like collective bargaining has gone down and down over cultural issues. This isn't that cultural issues should be dismissed, as many like, centrist, right-wing Democrats are saying in the United States. Like, no, these cultural fights shouldn't be backed down from either. But, what fascists do is they like use these cultural, cutting points to get people against each other, right? Where it's like, and one of the most common examples of this is how a lot of men are like, hey, college is becoming a women-dominated space. And then now what is happening in response in part is to devalue college. The moment women and I are doing well in college and university, now let's just get the doctors, let's just get the scientists, let's just get the professors to work and screw in the iPhones.
I mean, there was Laura Ingraham when the Doge cuts were first happening. She had a thing about stupid bureaucrats, like get a real job. And it's like, yeah, cancer research scientists, like get a real job. Like, yeah,
Nuclear
public
scientists in
yeah,
Amarillo.
yeah, public education social researcher on marginalizations and impacts. Like that's literally my sister-in-law who lost her
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
like like works for Harvard, like yeah, all of it. It's like ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like she was a
Yeah,
useless bureaucrat focused on DEI the whole day.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
Well,
but
and
which, and again, DEI is not inherently bad. It's just the issue at hand is that, you know, that these things are are not often expressed well, right? The way diversity and equity is inclusion expressed is often imperfect. A lot of it's like rainbow capitalism, right? A lot of it's like the
yeah,
target stuff. But
yeah,
you know what's not that's not it's a fake issue necessarily, but like rainbow capitalism isn't doing any like I shouldn't say real harm, but it's not doing substantive real harm. What does substantive real harm is when weaponize the silly stupidity of like target rainbow capitalism and you use that to fire individuals like your sister-in-law, when you use it to fire cancer researchers, defund, universities throughout the country, basically get the EU to go, wink, wink, we have a new fund to get scientists to come over here, not saying specifically where, but everybody knows where they're talking about, right? Like that, like a lot of, researchers are either considering or actually leaving the United States. We're literally, changing our labor relations through brain draining. We made this push into a service economy for better and for worse. And now
yeah.
we have a fascist regime that's like, actually, let's bring the factories back for our fascist ends.
You've been following the Trump meme coin situation.
I mean, that's its own other thing. But
Yeah.
one thing I think to stick with the factory stuff.
Oh,
Uh,
sure.
yeah, one of the things, and the whole corruption thing is just, oh my God, just all of that is a thing. But why do you think that fascist regimes always want to have industrialization and factories?
I think that it is easier, cheaper labor, uh, and it is easy to keep people focused. And I think you can make weapons, and uh, you can control medicine. You can Yeah.
And look what's happening. You have Howard
Hmm.
Lutnick again saying that like, oh,
Hmm.
the new economy is, working in a factory your entire life, your child working in a factory your entire life, and your grandkid, right? The labor relations that these fascists want are to accelerate the repairman economy.
Hmm.
We've already been heading in the direction that the majority of labor is going to be repair based labor.
Hmm.
Be it repairing AI, be it repairing automated tools. And, Trump is putting the pedal to the metal on that one and
Hmm.
wanting, every American to be by and large, I should say, to be repairman, a factory laborer, so that we can be war ready, right? Because, I mean, there's been so much imperialist dialogue from this particular group, be it Greenland, be it Canada, be it northern Mexico, be it Gaza, be it Yemen, be it Iran.
I mean, one of the key aspects of early fascism was total war or just war. Am I confusing the terms?
Well, total war is when you kill civilians. So
Mhm.
just war is what you're looking for, where you can like war is always justified. The first to really practice this was the
Yeah,
Roman Empire, was the
yeah.
first to ever justify their wars. Because before the Roman Empire, people would just invade, whereas the Romans would create legal justifications and de declarations and frameworks of
Uh,
war. They started that practice to make their wars seem more justifiable to their citizens and to other kingdoms abroad.
wow, wow. So, just as we're coming to I guess an end for
Yeah.
today's discussion, I have something specific to ask you. That I'm just interested what your perspective is on this. And I have noticed that when I speak with right-wing people, there is a psychological experience where they can often be extremely empathetic when it is something directly in front of them. And I'm like
Hmm.
using the visual of like literally in front, but I just mean that
Yeah.
when it's
No,
somebody that's
literally
in
in
their
front.
yeah, but when it's somebody in their personal space or somebody they know, there can be empathy. Where the moment it's outside of that space, it is
It's gone.
it's gone. And so I'll give just a couple of examples that have really I've just noticed is there can be a such levels of dehumanizing language done towards people who are supposedly criminals and gang members, and literally fascist talking points, dehumanizing talking points, genocidal talking points, and the same person, and this has happened more than once, will, when I speak about my work, will have so much empathy and so much like, wow, that's, they're just human, right? It's when speaking about somebody who's a gangbanger who's locked up, or working with somebody who may have been involved with a hate group, or working with somebody who's in for making a very bad mistake, or a gentleman who I know who robbed, who basically was a small business owner. I don't know what their business was, but pandemic hit, they had no money, and they and another person had the idea to rob a liquor store. They have no skill robbing liquor stores. They got busted immediately. He has to serve 5 years, and complete regret, like completely regrets it. Like, what the fuck was I thinking, kind of thing. And it just, the reason I bring these up is that like I can tell those stories or those examples, and people have so much empathy, but the moment it's outside of that space, it's like, get them out of here. I don't care if they're alive or dead. And like I've heard people say these things, and it's just what would, as a philosopher who thinks
Hmm.
about this, what's your interpretation of that?
I mean, the interpretation is, the visceral confrontation versus the abstract bad guy, right? when it becomes a media spectacle, like that Trump rally where, they're showing immigrants like getting their, head shaved, like you have people, USA, USA. But then, some of those people, if they saw like their neighbor locked up in front of them, it's like, wait, I know that person. They're not bad. And so it is the ability to remove empathy, right? Because you cannot empathize if they are not able to match your experience, right? So it really is the usefulness of being able to dehumanize the other. But there is times where we just simply cannot dehumanize what's before us, right? My uncle has said a lot of horrible rhetoric about immigrants. Here comes in, his own family, right? Who, were immig not me personally, but my grandparents are immigrants. My girlfriend, both of her parents are immigrants, and he's perfectly fine and nice, uh, most of the time. And so, in that regard, what we end up with is the inability to express those tendencies because they're unabstractable. When someone is hit in the face with a situation, you cannot ignore that that's before you. This is something Levi Nas points out very well. You can't ignore that which faces you to your face. You cannot ignore the face-to-face conversation. Even trying to ignore it is an answer.
There's an interesting theory, like a call it um, psychotherapeutic theory on music and subjectivity and why people have responses uh, to the same piece of violence in a song versus a film. And like one of the examples is Cop Killer by Ice-T caused much more controversy than Terminator, which came out the same year, going in and murdering an entire police station. Arnold Schwarzenegger did it. And so the argument is why was one more controversial than another? And the interesting piece of the psychoanalytic theory behind subjectivity is that when watching a film, the human being is watching something that is observable. They're they're seeing something outside of themselves. Whereas when hearing a piece of music, it becomes a subjective experience as if you are the character. And there can be a feeling of, I don't want to feel like that, especially, and this is where the social dynamics do come in, especially when there's racialized tension that has been baked into the structure or patriarchal tension. That just to give one more piece on that, like I learned early on that when you have boys, young males, we often say, "You got this," like yeah, like um, you can handle it. Whereas girls, we say, "Be careful, watch out," and that intentionality, I made a point to not say "watch out" to my daughter when she was doing things like standing on a balancing place, because it's like people go, well, "What if she falls?" And it's like, then she falls. Like obviously, I'm not going to let my 2 year old at the time be in a place where danger is going to happen, but I'm going to let her fall off the slide, like the 2 foot slide. I'm going to let her experience that to learn it, because we do that to our sons. And it's very interesting because my daughter is very quote unquote girly. Like she loves princesses. She wears a tiara every single day. Uh, she wears princess dresses every single day. So we did not, quote unquote, stop her femininity.
Right.
She's extremely feminine, but she is also very open to science and STEM things. She's very, very interested in building things. She's very interested in
Nice.
cars. She's very interested in dinosaurs. She doesn't question somebody's gender on where to play a game or how to play a game. And
Yeah.
it's just like that was the point of being open to it and making sure that those spaces, and of course we're still learning. Like I cannot wait to find out when I'm 15 all the mistake, or when she's 15 all the mistakes. It's like, oh yeah, all right, man, it caused lifelong trauma at that point, huh? Okay. But but the point is that we didn't restrict, and actually helped flourish some of the feminine pieces of her, as well as the masculine pieces of her. And
Man, I could not end
yeah,
on a more beautiful note. I think that's
yeah,
what we should be doing as a society. Express all them beautiful notes.
yeah. Yeah, I mean it really is ridiculous because both sets of grandparents have mentioned, you tried to stop this. Like as our daughter is like wearing like a flowery princess dress. And my wife and I, the response, it's always like, we didn't try to stop anything. Like like what are you talking about? We never had like a rule, no princess dresses. Like literally when she was born, we just dressed her in neutral colors. And when she started to pick colors, and like it was like, what color do you want? She would pick purple. We let her wear purple. We didn't say you're gonna wear purple. Like she chose that color, and we were like, yeah, great. Like that was
Who cares?
that was our controversial parenting, of us trying to stop
Good
her.
Lord.
Apparently,
Good
yeah,
Lord. Applied behavioral analysis and personal choices for a child. How dare you?
like keep in mind, like aside from like what that may sound to anybody, but like my wife's an educator, I'm a therapist. Like we're just aware of this stuff, so it's like it's not. It would be like, if you're a physical fitness person and like, you want your kid to know about sports. Like, it's like we want her to know about, expression and emotional health. Uh, yeah, because they're real things.
Amen.
Yeah, yeah. All right, cool, awesome. Well, thank you again, Anthony.
No, thank you, man.
Is there any way people can connect with you, if
Just
they want
Google
to?
my full name, Anthony David Vernon, and you'll find something somewhere eventually.
Yeah. Excellent. And again, my name is Dorian Wallace, he, him. This is This Machine Kills Fascist, and we'll see you all next time.
This machine kills fascists. 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 This machine kills fascists.